Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. After weeks of waiting, California Governor Gavin Newsom has vetoed SB-1047. Of course, for months, SB-1047 has been one of the biggest topics of conversation in AI, certainly the biggest topic of conversation when it comes to AI regulation. The bill would have had a number of different provisions. It would have required anyone spending more than $100 million to train an AI model to run safety tests and enshrine limits based on the results. It required models to feature a built-in kill switch, allowing human intervention to shut the model down. And it would have potentially created downstream liability for developers of models in a way that opponents of the bill said would have had a freezing effect, especially when it came to open source. There were a few different points that Newsom highlighted in his letter explaining his logic. First of all, he makes it clear why this conversation is so important to California, pointing out that 32 of the world's 50 leading AI companies call California home. He said, "As stewards and innovators of the future, I take seriously the responsibility to regulate this industry." Next, he reminded that this was far from the only legislation around AI that had hit his desk. He said, "This year, the legislature sent me several thoughtful proposals to regulate AI companies in response to current rapidly evolving risks, including threats to our democratic process, the spread of misinformation and deepfakes, risks to online privacy, threats to critical infrastructure, and disruptions in the workforce." On the other hand, he pointed out that SB 1047 was about a different type of risks, specifically about risks that could, but are not guaranteed to emerge. Newsom writes, "Key to the debate is whether the threshold for regulation should be based on the cost and number of computations needed to develop an AI model, or whether we should evaluate the system's actual risks regardless of these factors." It seems that a big part of Newsom's rejection is the idea of training and computation as the framework for risk. He claimed that by focusing only on the most expensive and large-scale models, the public could get a false sense of security when smaller specialized models could emerge that were equally or even more dangerous. He said, while well-intentioned, SB 1047 does not take into account whether an AI system is deployed in high-risk environments, involves critical decision-making, or the use of sensitive data. Instead, the bill applies stringent standards to even the most basic functions so long as a large system deploys it. I do not believe this is the best approach to protecting the public from real threats posed by the technology. And in here, you see some of the core arguments of antagonists of SB 1047 repeated. First of all, an overfocus on hypothetical risks in the future, as opposed to contemporaneous and realized risks right now, as well as a real question around the ultimate arbitrariness of using training costs as the key parameter. Still, what Newsom wasn't arguing was that we should entirely wait for X risks to show up. He said, "Let me be clear. I agree with the author. We cannot afford to wait for a major catastrophe to occur before taking action to protect the public. Safety protocols must be adopted, proactive guardrails should be implemented, and severe consequences for bad actors must be clear and enforceable." Newsom also seemed to suggest that while it may be the case that California has to lead in certain approaches, there's clearly a sense that federal action is on the way and is kind of the more important thing here. He concludes, "I am committed to working with the legislature, federal partners, technology experts, ethicists, and academia to find the appropriate path forward, including legislation and regulation. Given the stakes, protecting against actual threats without unnecessarily thwarting the promise of this technology to advance the public good, we must get this right." Now, interestingly, in addition to that document, the press release that the governor's office sent out situated this in a wider set of initiatives that he had signed. Indeed, the press release was titled, "Governor Newsom announces new initiatives to advance safe and responsible AI, protect Californians." The what you need to know summary is, Governor Newsom announced that the godmother of AI, Dr. Fei-Fei Li, as well as a set of others, will help lead California's effort to develop responsible guardrails for the deployment of Gen AI. He also ordered state agencies to expand their assessment of the risks from potential catastrophic events. The press release points out that over the past 30 days, Newsom has signed 17 bills covering deployment and regulation of Gen AI, including those that would crack down on deepfakes, require AI watermarking, and more. Halfway down the page, after a bunch more information about what he had signed and about this new committee, they added a paragraph quote from the piece we just read about his veto of SB 1047. So what was the response? First, let's look at the side who had been advocating for this. Senator Scott Wiener writes, "The veto is a setback for everyone who believes in oversight of massive corporations that are making critical decisions that affect the safety and welfare of the public and the future of the planet. The companies developing advanced AI systems acknowledge that the risks these models present to the public are real and rapidly increasing. While the large AI labs have made admirable commitments to monitor and mitigate these risks, the truth is that voluntary commitments from industry are not enforceable and rarely work out well for the public. This veto leaves us with the troubling reality that companies aiming to create an extremely powerful technology face no binding restrictions from US policymakers, particularly given Congress's continuing paralysis around regulating the tech industry in any meaningful way. The veto is a missed opportunity for California to once again lead on innovative tech regulation, just as we did around data privacy and net neutrality, and we are all less safe as a result. At the same time, the debate around SB 1047 has dramatically advanced the issue of AI safety on the international stage. Major AI labs were forced to get specific on the protections they can provide to the public through policy and oversight. Leaders from across civil society, from Hollywood to women's groups to youth activists, found their voice to advocate for common-sense proactive technology safeguards to protect society from foreseeable risks. The work of this incredible coalition will continue to bear fruit as the international community contemplates the best ways to protect the public from the risks presented by AI. California will continue to lead in that conversation. We are not going anywhere. Dan Hedricks, the director of the Center of AI Safety and one of the main authors of the bill, had a similar message. He said that the veto was disappointing and that it represented a reasonable path, but he said, "I am not discouraged. The bill encouraged collaboration between industry academics and lawmakers and has begun moving the conversation about AI safety into the mainstream where it belongs. AI developers are now more aware that they already have to exercise reasonable care lest they be found liable." He talked about how it galvanized a wide coalition of supporters, although he did take a dig at the tech industry, saying, "Discourse and tactics around the bill from some in the industry have been disheartening. It is disgraceful that many opponents trafficked in misinformation to undermine this bill rather than engaging in a factual debate. SB 1047, he claims, has revealed that some industry calls for responsible AI are nothing more than PR air cover for their business and investment strategies." Now, on the flip side, there was, of course, a ton of excitement. A16Z's Mark Andreessen said, "Thank you, Governor Newsom, for vetoing SB 1047, for siding with California dynamism, economic growth, and freedom to compute over safety doomerism and decline." Y Combinator President Gary Tan said, "What a red letter day. But truth be told, tomorrow is the beginning of the next fight. The D-cells will never stop. But we won't either." Meta Chief AI Scientist Jan LeCun writes, "The open source AI community is grateful for your sensible decision, Governor Newsom." Presidio Bay founder Cyrus said, "Grateful that the rest of the country will see California isn't a lost cause and that common sense can still prevail over misguided ideology. Gavin Newsom made the right call vetoing SB 1047. Scott Wiener would do well to listen to his constituents and support the economic engine driving innovation in his own city, rather than pushing for half-baked regulatory measures that would undermine the entire region." What about people who've been a little bit more in the middle? Reid Hoffman writes, "Appreciate Gavin Newsom for his leadership in recognizing that SB 1047 as written would have slowed innovation, learning, and progress towards safe AI by imposing a vague and preemptive regulatory regime on AI developers worldwide, including many California-based companies. While the bill's authors made a commendable effort to narrow its scope, its final form was still too broad and ambiguous to be workable. To create the models that will make 24/7 access to highly capable and trustworthy medical assistants and tutors, we need regulation that prioritizes responsible innovation, not de facto prohibition through unprecedented liability standards." Mike Knoop from Zapier made the important point that even as this debate was going on, we saw one of the challenges of trying to regulate based on today's norms. Mike writes, "Glad to see SB 1047 officially vetoed. We must keep incentivizing AI innovation, not putting speed bumps on last-gen tech. This was under-discussed, but frontier models like OpenAI o1 showed 1047's approach was out of date before it even got decided. Based on his veto letter, Newsom seems to understand this nuance, which should be promising to both frontier researchers and safety advocates. Final thought, I saw many early opponents weaken their opposition as the bill improved. But I saw no early supporters weaken support as it became clear 1047 would not achieve its safety goals. This suggests to me the final bill was largely symbolic, and I think symbolic regulation, aka bureaucracy, has no place at the frontier of progress." Now, at this point, it's very clear that the fight is going to move national. Investor Vinod Khosla writes, "Great to see smart decision-making by Gavin Newsom on a very important national security and technological leadership issue. This wasn't a state issue as Wiener naively assumed. California will continue to lead AI development and hugely help the country." A respondent, Sefer, however, wrote, "It's not a federal issue either. Safeguards around powerful speech such as AI are a global concern and not one that can realistically be solved. Safety is nigh impossible to define due to a breadth of incompatible perspectives." Mark Andreessen went even more aggressive with Vinod, saying Vinod is lobbying to outlaw open source at the federal level. "I'm not speculating, I've been in the room as he's doing it." So if you want a preview of whether the next conversation is going to be any less contentious than this one, I don't think so. Now, of course, the next question is whether we'll see a veto override or some move to create something like SB 1047 as a California ballot measure. But for now, that seems to be the end of the story for 1047. Certainly, there will be a lot more to come on AI regulation. And of course, I will be here to cover it all. For now, that's going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Until next time, peace.